Welcome back, everyone. I'm Dylan. This is All You Can Board, and we are at the end of another month, which means it's time to find out what I played in February 2022. We're also going to change up the format just a little bit. I mean, obviously, I'm going to tweak this over time. This is only my second time doing this, and I'd love to get feedback from you guys and also see what you like and what you don't like. And I heard from you guys last time that you wanted to sort of lead up to the top 3 games of the month. I think last time I kind of covered them all, and then I said, out of everything I just covered, what are my top 3? I ended up talking about them again. This time I'm going to start with my biggest disappointment of the month, and then the rest aren't going to necessarily be ranked in any order until we get to the top 5. The top 5 I'm going to have ranked in order. It was a little bit hard for me to rank all the games in order because, you know, I'm not ranking them on the game that I like better than the other game. It's just on that one session. It just started to get too hard to differentiate them together. It just didn't make sense for me to do it that way. I will start with my, like I said, my biggest disappointment. Then I'll just sort of go through a whole bunch of games I played. The top 5 will be in order from 5 to 1, my favorite plays this month. I'm drinking cherry bubbly today. Obviously a bit of a downgrade, an inferior bubbly to mango, but still great. But you know, it can't always get the best flavor, otherwise it will not be the best flavor anymore. You have to have the comparison so that you know the mango's better, right? I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. I love doing these videos because I'm just like, get to relax a little bit. Not that I'm not relaxed when I film other videos, and just sort of kick back and tell you guys what I played and talk about the games and my experiences with them, which I have a lot of fun doing. So let's kick this off. February 2022, what did I play? The biggest disappointment of the month for me, and this is a tentative disappointment because I only played one session of this. I am just disappointed in that one session. I will absolutely be going back. I could have a different opinion over time, so don't get on my case too much just yet. Give me a couple more plays of it. That is Destinies. So Destinies is a game that I was pretty excited to get. I am a fan of campaign games. Destinies is one that I got, and I wasn't sure if I was going to get it and keep it on the shelf until I could get a group together for it. I wasn't sure if I was going to jump in solo. Ultimately, I had a night free. I felt like, I feel like exploring a board game. I just got Destinies. I can play it solo. It's a campaign game. I'm going to set it up on the table. I'm just going to play a solo campaign game. That may be why it was a disappointing experience for me. This didn't really land as a solo experience at the table. It's obviously an app-driven experience, and I just felt like I was playing a not interesting video game a lot of the times without having someone else there to share in the decisions, without having someone else there to just sort of like see what they're doing in comparison to what I'm doing and share that board and that experience and that night with. It just did not land. There's other campaign games like Gloomhaven that I actually really do enjoy solo, so that's why I approach this as a solo game. I just don't know if solo is going to be the way I want to play Destinies, and I also am interested now to see whether it's going to be drastically different for me at 2, 3, and 4, or one of those player counts compared to my solo experience, or if when I play it with other people, I'm still going to be disappointed in it. So I know this is kind of a divisive game. Like, some people really enjoy it. Some people say they don't enjoy it. It's kind of, I've seen reviews on both sides of it. So again, this is by no means a review of this game or a criticism, because I definitely need to experience more of it. I've only done the first scenario, but I had some high hopes going in, and as a solo experience, it just did let me down. So if you have played the solo and you agree with me, but you've also played it with other players, and you can compare and say, hey, Dylan, yeah, don't play this solo. It's much better with 2. Let me know in the comments, because I'd love to hear that, but I will be diving in with other people to see how the experience changes. But as of right now, unfortunately, that is my disappointment of the month. That is Destinies. Now we're just going to go into a whole bunch of games I played. I'm going to tell you about my experiences with them, and then of course we'll get to the top 5 when we get there. So the next game I played, and I played a couple sessions of this month, and that is Azul. Azul hits my table a lot, so this is no surprise. I love Azul. Every time I play it, I have a great time. I played it at 2 players, which is honestly might be my favorite player count now to play Azul. It's great as a 3 and 4 player game. I played all the player counts a bunch on BGA in person, but 2 player, there's just something really satisfying about the 2-player Azul game. It's you're specifically stopping your opponent from doing certain things by taking certain combinations of tiles, or you're leaving that one person a certain set of tiles that they're going to have to put all to their floor and get negative points. So it has much more player interaction, I found, at 2, because you're specifically targeting that person. At 3, it can get hard to do the calculations of, if I take this, who's going to get the next one. At that point, you're thinking more about your own board than 2 other players or 3 other players in the game. At 2, you're targeting those that player a little bit more specifically, and I find that can make for a bit of a meaner experience, but it's just more enjoyable in my opinion. So the decisions are more interesting, and overall I just have a great time with Azul. But 2 players is where I think it shines. So yeah, I played a couple games of Azul. I think I won one and I lost one, which is, I'm not that great of an Azul player. I just enjoy playing it. But yeah, every time I play it reminds me how much I love it, and honestly, it's going to be hard for the original Azul to be topped. Eventually on our channel, we are going to do a video comparing all 4 Azuls. We just need to play Queen's Garden and get our hands on it. But we do have all the other 3 between myself and Carlo. And I remember when I first played Stained Glass of Sintra, I actually thought that I liked it better than the original. I think I even said that to Carlo at one point. I think I now like this better than the original. But it took me playing the original a couple more times to remind myself, no, you know what, there is something about this this original experience that is just really hard to top for me. The Sintra is great, and I'm excited to try Summer Pavilion. I've heard like really good things about it as well. But it's going to be hard to top the original for me because it's just such a pure version of it, and I love it so much. But I've heard great things about Queen's Garden, and there's some people that are convinced on our Discord saying, oh, when you play it, it's 100% going to be your favorite one, which is getting my hype levels up. I gotta keep things at bay so I don't overhype this game. But yeah, so I played a couple games with Azul, and it was fantastic. Like, if you somehow have not played Azul yet or have not picked it up, it's one of the games I would highly recommend. Honestly, when people ask for recommendations, if they haven't played it or purchased it, it's one of the ones I recommend because I don't think I've ever recommended it and had someone not enjoy it on some level. Next game I played was The Hunger. So The Hunger, I'm gonna have some thoughts on this right now, but we're definitely gonna have to wait until I have played it more to get my full thoughts on this, because I've only played this once, and I played it as a 2-player game, and it was my first introduction to this. I had just received it, played it with a friend of mine, and if you don't know, The Hunger is kind of similar to Clank in a lot of ways. There's obviously some differences as well, but the gameplay flow and the mechanics are kind of very Clank-esque. The difference here is that the thematics of it is you're basically a vampire consuming humans, and by consuming humans, you're adding them to your deck. But if your deck gets too full and you get too bloated, it slows you down and you can't traverse the landscape as efficiently or as quickly as you would like, which means the goal is to get back to the castle, and you might not be able to get back to the castle because you keep drawing cards that won't allow you to move because you filled your deck up with too many useless cards. So if you know Dominion and you can get the provinces, which give you 7 points at the end of the game, in Dominion, you don't want to get those cards until late, because otherwise they clog up your deck and potentially your hand with cards that do nothing. That's kind of similar to what's happening here, but that's basically most of the cards you're getting in your deck, which means you really, really have to balance the cards you're collecting, and then you can digest cards, which eliminates them from your deck, but you still get to keep the points at the end of the game. So you really have to be efficient with your deck building. Because I didn't quite know all this strategy or know those differences compared to Clank and other games I played, both of us just filled our deck with so many cards. We kept buying from the market, and it was only after a few rounds of that we realized this game's only 15 rounds. We're on round 8 or 9. We're so far from the castle, and I haven't drawn enough moving cards to even move this far on the board. So I think we both realized we were going to make it back. So neither of us made it back to the castle, which means technically all the points are just for fun, because neither of us is allowed to win the game at that point. In order to win the game, you do have to make it back to the castle, and then at that point, points are compared. So technically we both lost. Apparently no one won The Hunger. We calculated points anyways, but I think it was just a learning experience that I do have to approach The Hunger differently than I've played other deck builders. Completely dropped the ball on it, so I definitely need to play this again. I will say that the board, the gameplay is very unique. The board looks great, and the deck building mechanics and that twist on deck building, not twist, I mean, I've seen it in other games, but that, lean heavily into the fact of having to really thin your deck or be very selective on the cards you buy. And sometimes if you see a stack of cards and there's one you really want, you're thinking, well, all those cards are going to get me points, but now I have to take 4 extra cards into my deck. That might slow me down. You really have to be focusing on digesting the humans out of your deck and being selective on which ones you buy. So it's a neat twist in that way on deck building and making you think a little bit more. So I'm really excited to come back to this, which I absolutely will. Carlos still hasn't played it, so we'll probably play a game at some point and explore a little bit more. That is The Hunger, and I should have mentioned this is by Richard Garfield, who is one of the designers of Magic the Gathering. So that's one of the reasons I was really interested in this, and Carlo was as well. Cannot wait to explore it a little bit more, and hopefully I'll play it properly. Next up, a game I played 2 games of this month, and it had been a while since I had even put this game on the table. We did a how to play a long time ago, and that is Savannah Park. So Savannah Park, we did do a how to play before the game released. We got a copy to do a how to play on, so that was a long time ago. I hadn't played this in a very long time, it felt like, and I played 2 sessions this month, and honestly, sometimes when you're away from a game for a long time, especially a game that is considered to a family game, lighter rule set, you start to tell yourself, oh, this game is probably not one I'm going to come back to, or the mechanics aren't very in depth enough, strategic enough. I'd never choose that game. So it took someone else suggesting this for it to hit the table, and they said, hey, how about this game? And I said, yeah, sure, we can play that. It's an easy teach. And playing it, I'm realizing, just especially playing 2 games so close together, how much strategy there actually is in this really simple set of rules. I mean, all you do is you have your entire board full of these animal tiles, and on your turn, you're basically calling one of your tiles out. So if I could say the tile with just one elephant on it. Both players now have to find that tile on their board, the one that I called out, pick it up and move it to a different empty spot on your board and flip it to the blue side or the red side, whatever player color you're playing. And now it's locked in on that spot that you're putting it in. So every tile on your board is going to move to a different spot before the end of the game. And you have to think about position, almost like one of those sliding puzzles, the one where you have like one empty spot and you have to slide the puzzle pieces around to get something from one side to the other. You're essentially doing that with all these animals to make herds, big groups of the same type of animals, all elephants together, all antelope together, and you're going to score kind of in a King Domino-esque way, where if you look at the elephant, it's going to be count up all the elephants and times it by the amount of watering holes in that group, and that's your amount of points. So if you have 8 elephants but no watering holes, you get 0 points for that herd. So it's really interesting, and it actually is strategic, more strategic than I think I remembered it being. And the 2 games I had were really, really fun. Like, honestly, I had a great time with it. I would easily come back and play it again. It's a quick playing game. And the theme's great too. It looks great on the table. If you want an easy teach for someone and you only have half an hour to play a game or something, and you're wanting something to kind of add to a night or end the night or a filler game, Savannah Park works really well, and I'm really impressed, and I'm definitely going to be coming back to it a lot more now. It sort of reminded me of the joy of it, and I think I needed that. So I'm really glad it was suggested, and I'm really glad I got it to the table twice, because I was able to try different things each one and sort of see the differences and how much the strategy can sort of be stretched in Savannah Park as well for a family level game like this. So yeah, that is Savannah Park. I played it twice and it was fantastic. All right, next up, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one because I played it last month too. I'm probably going to play it almost every month at this point. That is Radlands. I am obviously enamored with this game. I've been talking about it a bunch. It's my #1 game from 2021. You're not going to stop hearing me talk about it. If you haven't heard about it yet or haven't played it, check out any of our other videos. You can check out my everything I played in January video where I talk about it a little bit more in depth. You can check out my top games of 2021 to hear what we talked about there. This 2-player card battler is fantastic. Every time I play it, I always have a good time. I've yet to have a miss of an experience with it. I get different cards in every single game, different bases to be able to sort of form my strategy. So that's made every game feel different. I'm drawing into different cards. I'm starting to get familiar with some of the cards in the deck, so I can try to guess what my opponent has, or when I get one, I can try to think of what I want to combo with, or whether I'm going to sacrifice that card or use it, depending what's in the game. Love this game. I'm going to keep coming back to it. That is Radlands. Next up, I played a game I had never played before. I actually just purchased it, and it's funny, I just purchased it and I didn't even play my copy. I played my Game Cafe's copy. We played it twice, and I am super, super impressed with this game. That is Mandala. Mandala is a game that I'm going to tell you why I took me so long to play this and buy this game, and that is because I actually thought the Mandala, when I saw the box and everything people were talking about it, I thought it was Mancala. And Mancala, if you look it up, is this game with like jewels. I'm not going to describe it all, but you're moving them from like different areas of this like wooden board or whatever, and there's different like compartments and you're moving jewels across them. That's what I thought this was, and for some reason I was just like, oh yeah, everyone's talking about it like as if they hadn't played it before. I'm like, I played this before, like it's good, but I don't know why it's all of a sudden just taken off now. And it was only later that I realized it's Mandala, a completely different game. That made me look into it, and then I realized, hey, I actually want to check this game out, and so that's why I'm late to the party on it. I played 2 games. Absolutely adore this game. There's so much interesting stuff going on, and for the 2-player game that plays so quick, I love that combination. 2-player games that have so much strategy going on with simple rules. So basically, you just have this mat in front of you. It comes with this nice cloth mat, and you're going to have these two mandalas, these circular mandalas, and the center of them is considered the mountain, and then each player has a field on either side of it. You can play cards to your own field or to the mountain, but an entire mandala can only have one copy of each color. So if I play a green to my field, now no green can be played to the other player's field or to the mountain. Once one of every color is in a mandala, the mandala completes, and you're going to take everything on the mountain, and players are going to alternate choosing cards from that mandala to put to their river in front of them. Whoever chooses first is the person who has the most cards played in their field. And sometimes you want to be you often want to be the first one to choose, because there's going to be a group of 5 blacks in there and maybe 1 green, and the 5 blacks is going to score you more points than 1 green because there's more of that card. So having more cards in your field is important, but you also want to prioritize putting into the mountain what you eventually want to grab. So there's a lot of push and pull there, but even the order that you pull them into your river, you can only have 1 color in each of the spots in your river, and the further down they go, because you always have to play from the left first, you get more points. So I mean, I've done the best I can to explain this. Some of this might not make sense to you. You kind of just have to see the images and everything and experience the game to understand it. But the strategy is really deep. There's a lot to think about. You can, there's a push and pull with your opponents when you have like this hand where you're like, okay, I have a whole bunch of red cards in my hand, so I can use them to control this field, and then I'll be able to win that mandala to be able to pull first to the mountain. And then suddenly they play a red card to the mountain, and now all my red cards are locked out of my hand to play into my field. So I have to look to the other mandala and say, okay, maybe I can play them here. Oh no, red's already been played there too, so now I just have a bunch of dead cards in my hand. So do you discard them to get different cards into your hand to be able to do something? Do I hold them for one of these mandalas completes? I mean, there's so much to think about, and the games play really, really quick, but they are so much fun. It's one of those games where you're like, oh, let's play another game, let's play another one. So I really, really am impressed by this game. I'm going to be playing a whole bunch more of this. It's going to be one of the ones I now suggest very often with 2 players, especially if we only have a little bit of time to play. In the same way that I normally would suggest games like Patchwork or Codenames Duet, Mandala is now going to be on that list for me because it plays quick, it hits the same notes for me, and it's not quite like anything else I have in my collection. In certain ways it is, but it has enough going on that's unique that I can't compare it to, that it kind of stands on its own in a way. So if you haven't played Mandala and you're looking for good 2-player games, I would highly, highly recommend it. Next up, I played another session of a game I talked about before, and it was on my top games of 2021, and that is Furnace. Furnace, I'm gonna take a sip of this. I always have to announce when I'm taking a sip of this because I only realize I'm thirsty in the middle of a sentence for some reason. And then you guys just have to watch me drink in awkward silence, right? So Furnace, I'd only played at 2 players with Carlo, which involves having a dummy player essentially in the game. So I played with 3 now. We played with Braden as well, and that is definitely the best way to play. 2 was still great. I was surprised how good 2 was, but 3 was fantastic. The auction elements for a game like this it's a unique auction element where you have these discs of different values, and depending on the timing of them, you're either locking something down for yourself, but then opening yourself up to lose other ones. But at the same time, sometimes you want to lose the bid on certain cards, because losing the bid still means you get an amount of resources that multiplies by the number on the disc you played on there. So if I lost a vote by putting a 3 to someone else's 4, I'm gaining whatever resources are on the top of the card times 3. So sometimes you want to lose bids as well. But when you win the cards, you're creating this engine in front of you that you're then using to get as many points as you can in the very few 4 rounds that are in the game that seem to fly by. We actually played the variant. The variant is that you have to produce in your engine from left to right, which was way preferable way for us to play. We found that the engine phase, it's not bad when you don't use the variant, but it's just a little bit more convoluted, and it just seems to it's a bit busier, and it takes more time. Having to plan your engine to go from left to right and think ahead like that made things a lot more crucial and interesting as we were positioning our cards, but it also made that second phase go a lot quicker. So I think we'll always play with that variant from now on. But man, as a 3-player game, Furnace is really good. If I had played it at 3 players before I did my top 10 of 2021, I probably would have maybe even bumped it 1 spot up or something. I'm not really sure, and maybe it's exactly fine where it is, but either way, Furnace is just a really, really great game, and I am so excited to play more, but I want to try it at 4 players too to see how it works. But that 3 and 4 player experience for Furnace is fantastic. All right, the next game that I played, this is a game I don't have here because this is Carlo's copy, and it's from Dr. Finn's Games, and that is Mining Colony. So Mining Colony we received along with Nanga Parbat and Biblios Quill and Parchment. Mining Colony was the last one we went to, and it was honestly the one that, for some reason, one reason or another, I'm not really sure why, was the least on my radar. So it took me a long time to play this. Carlo already played the solo mode. We played it as a 3-player game with Braden and Carlo, or I did. And I had a lot of fun with Mining Colony. This is a game I absolutely want to come back to. There's a lot of spatial puzzle stuff you have to do where you're basically positioning your tiles a certain way on the board, but even the way that you select them, I'm burping a lot from the bubbly, and I'm like, try not to burp in the middle of my words. I need to not drink carbonated water when I film videos. The way you're even selecting the cards from the central market area is by playing cards from your hand that have these sort of initiative numbers. But every time you play them, it's going to be eliminated from your deck, like if you win the initiative. So there's an incentive to sometimes hold these numbers back to win more important ones later on, but at the same time, you want to win the ones that are going to affect your board as well. So there's just a lot of interesting decisions being made with these initiative cards to decide who picks first, second, third, essentially. And at the same time, then having to position everything on your board to align certain things up, to claim tokens that are limited from the supply. I mean, a lot of this is hard to describe without it actually being in front of me or demonstrating to you. Needless to say, though, there's just a lot of really cool stuff in Mining Colony that I was just not anticipating or expecting. It was probably my biggest surprise, maybe I would say, out of all the games that I'm looking at here of the month. Just in terms, I came in thinking like, oh, I'm sure it'll be good, but I didn't really have many expectations for it. And I left with thinking that night, man, that was a really, really fun game to play. So highly recommend you check out Mining Colony if you haven't. It's an inexpensive game, and I think it's one that has a lot to explore and will make you want to come back to it a bunch. The next 2 games we're going to look at are some very special games to this channel, and that's because there's a heated debate between Carlo and I on which of these games is better. You might know which ones I'm talking about. We wanted to play both of these games leading up to a video that we're going to have coming out potentially very, very, very soon. Keep an eye out on the channel for that. That is going to finally compare these 2 games and wage the war between A Feast for Odin and Agricola. So, first game we played was Agricola. It had been a long time since I had played Agricola, and I had never played it with higher than 2 players, so I finally did. Carlo, Braden, and I played Agricola on Board Game Arena, actually, and I will say, I'll admit, the 3-player experience I had was my favorite of all the times I played Agricola. It was much better to me, personally, than the 2-player. I know Carlo really likes it at 2-player, but I think his favorite one is 3 still. I'd have to ask him. I'm going to get that wrong, and he's going to get mad at me. But Agricola as a 3-player game for me, I just much preferred. There was more interesting decisions being made. There was more vying for spots. I actually didn't feel like it was more of a punishing game for some reason. Maybe I just found that I did better, even though I didn't win. But it just was way more interesting each turn, each round, trying to see everything that was unfolding with 3 people vying for spots on the board. So Agricola is a game that I definitely need to explore more. Obviously, I'm a bigger fan of A Feast for Odin, but I'll be the first to admit I just haven't played a lot of Agricola to even give a proper, on my own, full comparison between them. But I did enjoy my 3-player playthrough. It reminded me that I really do enjoy this game, and I want to play it more. If I play it more, I could easily see it cracking my top 50 of all time, even if it's just in the 40 to 50 or something like that. I just need to get more plays of it in. That is Agricola. Which of course means that I also played, like I said, one of the best games of all time, and that is A Feast for Odin. Feast for Odin I absolutely love, and if anyone doesn't know, every time I play A Feast for Odin, or almost every single time, I've adopted this mindset that I'm going to always try a bit of a different strategy, because one of the things I love about this is, as a sandbox game, there's so many different paths you can take. And even if you take the same path as a previous time, like for instance, I'm going to focus really hard on taking the other location boards, like the Newfoundland board and Labrador or whatever, and just try to get a lot of my points from there. You can take that strategy multiple games in a row, but even what you do with them or which specific boards you grab can be different. So even going down the same path can have different deviations. You can take those boards and say, I'm going to focus on not getting the income on them. I'm just going to go for points in the bonuses, or vice versa. So this time I adopted a strategy where I was going to see if I could do well, pretty much ignoring the minuses and the income on the main player board to start anyways, and focus on emigrating ships very early when they're cheap, as well as taking additional boards and focusing on the income on those. I had a very low score throughout the entire game, and then in the last round, I think I gained like 44 points or something. I didn't win, so I don't know if it's how viable of a strategy it is, but I came close to getting, I was only like 10 points out of like second place or maybe even first place. So I still had a respectable score, and it was just really fun exploring another path in Feast for Odin. It's one of the things I love so much about this game is that you can play it a little bit differently every time, and there's so many different paths you can go on and strategies you can adopt and things you can do in your turn. It's an amazing game. I'll leave it there because I could talk about through the entire video about A Feast for Odin. We're going to have plenty more coming on the channel. Keep your eyes peeled for a very special video coming soon. All right, it is time for my top 5 plays of February. What are my top 5 games that I played this month? And again, this isn't how I would rank these games ultimately. This is just my sessions this month, my experiences this month, how I would rank them. So number 5 this month is a game that's not new, and I've had this game for a while. You might have seen it on the shelf. I have played it a few different times in the past with a few different people at different player counts, but it had been a long time since I came back to this game, and I forgot how much of a joy this game is. I had such a great time with it. I need to make a point of suggesting it more because it is really good, and I think more people need to experience it. That is Photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is such a unique and beautiful game where you're essentially have this large board with a sun that's rotating around and facing the board at different angles. We are all planting trees and seeds that are growing into trees onto the board, and depending how the sun hits these trees, you're gonna, like for instance, if I have a large tree here and a small tree here, when the sun is shining this way, the large tree casts a shadow on the small tree, which means that the small tree is not going to give me any light points. The big tree will because it does get hit by the sun. So you have to position your trees in such a way that the sun is hitting all your trees and you're potentially using your trees to block your opponent so that you get more light points than they do. You're using light points to gather more seeds, to upgrade trees, to take a small tree and put it to a medium tree, and a medium tree to a large tree. You can upgrade a large tree into a point tile. So that's how you get your points in the game. You want to get your trees to the largest size you can, and then upgrade them, evolve them to get more points. And their position on the board will make you pick tiles from a different stack of point tiles. So you want to try to get to the center of the board because that's worth more points than the edge of the board. It is so much fun and so interesting and really hard to plan at the best strategy. You can say, okay, like I've played Photosynthesis a couple times, I should be an expert now, but it's really hard to, I should be an expert now after playing the game a couple times. I don't know why I said it that way, but when you position your trees, it can be really hard to say, okay, yeah, I can block my opponent this round, but you also have to think, well, eventually the sun's going to rotate, and if they've grown their tree, they may block you now. So you're constantly having to balance, and you can never perfectly pull off an entire round where you're scoring all the maximum of amount of light points. So lots to think about, really fun. The table presence is amazing. This rotating the sun is really good. All the cardboard 3D trees that are set up look amazing. So if you haven't checked out Photosynthesis, I would highly recommend it. You have to sort of be into the chess style of games. It has that abstract mentality of, like, you know, you're positioning trees on the board and everything. There's elements from other games too, but it is very unique. It's hard to compare it to a lot of different things because of how different I find that it is to other games. But what an experience. I forgot how much I love this game. I'm going to come back to it a lot more. I'm going to do my best to mention it more often on the channel because it really is such a joy to play. That was number 5. Number 4 game of February. Honestly, it was hard for me to rank all 4 of these games because there were some really good gems in there. But number 4 is going to go to Equinox. We played Equinox as a 3-player game with Braden as well when we played a whole bunch of games that night. And I will be the first to admit, in the first few turns of Equinox, I think many of us at the table were thinking, I'm not really sure what I should be doing right now. Like, what's my strategy? What should be accomplishing? It's this weird betting game where there's 8 different monster creatures that are in the game, and every round we are essentially going to eliminate one of these creatures. So we're playing over 5 rounds. So by the end of the game, you're going to whittle this thing down to, like, 2 of the creatures, 3 of the creatures, and you're betting on which creatures are going to last to the end of the game. And so we are all going to start influencing the board. If I keep betting on this creature and I bet on them earlier, it's going to be worth more points if I'm correct because I made earlier bets. So now my opponents might start trying to influence the cards to get that creature eliminated. So it becomes this push and pull of how much do you want to reveal, how do you want to impact the board, which cards do you want to hold back in your hand to be able to impact things because you're scared that someone might try to eliminate the creature you're betting on, so you have to hold some of those cards in your hand that have high values to be able to save that creature. There's a lot of cool stuff going on, and it is just a really, really fun game to play, especially at 3, with that much being considered. There was times when, you know, Carlo would bet on a creature and I had a very low value of that card, so I would then put a 0 card out there to say that creature's now the lowest one, it's going to get eliminated, and he'd go, oh, geez, like I didn't realize you had that card. So he would influence it with like a chameleon to change it. And then Braden would come in and influence, and we're just like going back and forth. And at the same time, now if you spend too many cards influencing that one creature, you're leaving yourself potentially not able to influence the other ones. And it's just very fun. It's a hard game to describe because it is very, very different than anything else in my collection. I haven't played a lot of these betting style games where you almost like, when you bet on like horses and things like that, you're betting on creatures, but you can influence the outcome. I'm sure there are other games like that out there. I can tell you almost for a fact there is, but I haven't played them. And so and I don't think Carlo had either. Maybe Braden hadn't either. So for all of us, this was just such a unique experience that we really couldn't compare it to anything else. So I had a great time with Equinox. I need to come back to this one. I absolutely will come back to it. And that is my number 4 play of February. Next up, all these games I'm going to spill onto the ground. Yeah, that was bound to happen. I'm stacking them precariously here, and I just scared the crap out of Desmond. Okay, my number 3 game of the month is a game that honestly, I should have played this a whole bunch a lot earlier than I did, because I bet you for a fact this probably would have made my top 5 of 2021 if I had actually played this, but when I made that list. This is such a fantastic game. I'd only ever played it once before that, and it was when it was a prototype, so I played part of it incorrectly, so I just really couldn't properly grade my experience with it. I've now played it twice this month, and I absolutely adore this game. I'm going to 100% buy my own copy of this, because this is Carlo's copy that I'm going to be showing you, and that is from Flato Games, Cascadia. Cascadia is phenomenal. It's such a simple game, but there's so many different objective cards that you can put out there to make every game feel unique, and there's so much strategy coming into which tiles you're taking, and not only the tiles but the icon, or I'm forgetting the names of the tiles here, but the wildlife tokens. There's habitat tiles and the wildlife tokens, and the wildlife tokens and the habitat tiles get picked together, and they each score independently of each other. So sometimes you really want a certain token, but you're going to have to take with a tile that you can't really utilize as much. So maybe you're going to use a nature token to take a different combination, or maybe you're going to put up with getting something you want and something you don't want. That element is very interesting. We've seen that in a couple other games like Overboss and things like that. But Cascadia, I think, is almost the one that does it the best, because there's so much to think about with the way the 5 different animals score, along with the territories, and try to match them up as well, that you can't do everything, and yet you still want to try. You try your best to do everything or represent yourself everywhere, but you almost have to pick 1 or 2 to really focus on, and then just sort of dabble in the rest. And I've just had such a great time with Cascadia. I still haven't tried all the different scoring cards that are in the game, so I can still play Cascadia a bunch and have different combinations of different experiences that I haven't had yet. If you have not checked out Cascadia, I honestly cannot recommend it enough. This is one that probably could have made it into the number 2 or number 1 spot if it wasn't for the fact that I had amazing sessions with 2 other games. But it is just phenomenal. Please check out Cascadia. You will not be disappointed. Number 2 in February is a game I don't own. Carlo does, and we played it at his place, so I don't have it here, and that is Dune Imperium. Dune Imperium is phenomenal. I thought this was going to be the number 1 game of the month. It only got bumped very, very recently. This is such an interesting worker placement game, because so many of the worker placement spots on the board are locked. You can't just say, I'm going to go to it. You can only go to them by playing certain cards from your hand that have icons that represent them. But you start the game with very few of those, so you have to add that's where the deck building comes in, because it also has deck building mechanics. So you have to be deck building, getting new cards to essentially allow you to go to some of these more restrictive spaces that will be more beneficial for you in many cases. And at the same time, there's this conflict area that I'm obviously not going to remember the proper name of, and I don't have the box here to refer to, that you're adding cubes into, and the conflict that's going to take place there is also going to affect the game in different ways on this other set of deck of cards, where the card has sort of like a first place, a second place, and a third place, and how you do in the conflict is going to get you different bonuses from there as well. And the way you win the game, I think, is getting to like a total of like, it's like 18 points or like 11 points, some low amount of points. It might even be like 11 or 9 points. I can't remember what it is now. It's not a lot of points for after playing all these games. You're scoring like 80 points, 90 points. It was refreshing to just say you have to hit this really small amount, and so every point feels like it really, really matters. Every time someone gains a point, it's a bigger deal, and that to me was such a unique aspect of the game that I haven't seen in a whole lot of other games. So that was really, really great. Obviously, the theme with Dune is really popular, but for me, I haven't read the Dune book. I haven't seen the movie. I just appreciated this from the mechanics of the game itself. I came at this from a bit of a unique perspective. And as someone who recently played and bought Lost Ruins of Arnak, which is also a deck builder worker placement game, I can confidently say now, it'll take me a couple more plays of Dune Imperium to be sure, but I think Dune Imperium is a much superior game to Lost Ruins of Arnak. Lost Ruins of Arnak is a fantastic game that doesn't innovate in a lot of ways. In small ways it does, but not in really big mechanical ways. Dune Imperium is a fantastic worker placement game, a fantastic deck builder game, and one that integrates them together in a very unique way that I haven't quite seen, with these different mechanics I explained that aren't really present that often in other games. So honestly, I would if you like worker placement games or deck builders or both, I would really recommend checking this game out because it is phenomenally fun. I cannot wait to play more. This is going to be one of the ones I'm suggesting a lot when I go back to Carlos' place to play more games. That is Dune Imperium number 2. Number 1, this is going to be an interesting pick. It's slid in there because I played it 4 times on the same night, back to back to back to back. It was actually in my January video as well, and that's because I play it every single month. And I usually play it as a 4-player game. All 4 of these sessions were played as a 5-player game. It was such a phenomenal experience. My number 1 game of February is King's Dilemma. King's Dilemma is a game that has been out for a little while. It is a campaign game. I talked about this last month. I'm not going to get into all the details, but the game completely revolves around voting. I mean, everything you're doing is essentially, you're on the King's Council. A dilemma is going to get presented. Some of them are morally going to just shake you to your core in terms of what you have to vote on, but you have to sort of role play your house and say, what do I want my house to accomplish with the outcome of this vote? If I vote on this thing to save this farmer's land, yes, that's the right thing to do, but it's going to mean that it's going to cost money because it's going to deplete our resources. And this game, I really need the money to be high, so maybe I'm going to vote against this. And at its core, that's pretty much the entire game. But when you have 5 people around a table and you start to see the game elements of these 5 icons that are in the middle of the board that represent, money and morale and war and food, and you're having to push and knowledge and having to push and pull them in different directions to meet your secret agendas. And then you're also getting into the discussions around the table because you're role-playing your houses, saying why you would or would not want these things to happen, and everyone's laughing. And I just had such an amazing night, and for sure, it's weighted towards King Dilemma compared to the other games. I played this 4 times back to back with a whole bunch of people that were really invested. But I think that's what's great about these games. Like I've already said, I love campaign games. This is a campaign game that isn't, an RPG or a dungeon diver kind of thing, which is usually what you find for campaign games. This is just a very unique diplomacy style game that if you have the right group for it, I honestly think it's going to land in such a special way, because all it is everyone gets to sit back, have a drink around the table, have some food, and just debate and barter and make we made a lot of side deals, paying each other to vote a certain way, which you're absolutely allowed to do in the game. With the right group, this is a phenomenal experience. I honestly cannot recommend this enough as a game that you sort of play, once a month or something. Have a group, meet once a month, play, minimum obviously 1 game, but maybe play 2 or 3 in a night. An average whole campaign lasts on average like 15 games. I think we're up to game 12 right now, and we can see the end closing in. Such an amazing experience. The reason this is number 1 is just because when you play a game like that all on one night, and you just sort of like go hard on this game and just we did this on Gloomhaven too, where we would say, instead of just doing one scenario, let's get together early on a Saturday and play as many scenarios as we can until like midnight. It's essentially what we did with King's Dilemma. And in your 30s, that's not something you do nearly as often as you did when maybe you were like 18 and stuff, or 16, and you can like spend an entire weekend with no responsibilities. So it just makes it extra special. I had such a fantastic time with this game. Every time I play it, it gets higher and higher on my list. I think you're going to absolutely see this game in my top 50 next year. It's already, if I was doing the top 50 right now, it would 100% be like very high up on the list. It's climbing every day, every time I play it. So good. That is King's Dilemma. I'm so stoked that a sequel to this game is being made, Queen's Dilemma, if you didn't know. I don't think it's coming out till next year, but now it's going to be an instant buy, instant pre-order for me, because my time with this one has been phenomenal. That's everything I played this month. I think I played, 15 unique games, but then I also played, Mandala twice. I played Savannah Park twice. I played King's Dilemma 4 times. There's other ones on here I played multiple times as well. So Cascadia I played twice. So I had many more sessions, but 15 unique games. I think I had 19 last month, so a little bit less, but relatively in the same ballpark. I am like really enjoying bringing these videos to you guys. I love talking about everything I played and giving you some initial thoughts. I would love to hear what you guys played in February. What is your, reply in the comments and let me know what is your favorite game that you played in February. Again, it doesn't have to be that you really like that game normally or it's your favorite game of all time, but that session specifically in February, what made it special? Why did you love it? What are you now? What new games did you play? What games did you had already played a long time ago that you hadn't revisited for a while did you play that you now remember that you enjoyed? What was your biggest disappointment of February? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you guys. And if you do like these videos, if you want them to keep coming, let me know, and also tell me if you have any suggestions. I did things a little bit differently this time leading up to the top 5. If there's another way you'd like to see me approach this or some other things you'd like to see me talk about, let me know. Otherwise, that's everything I played. I'm really looking forward to playing a whole bunch of new games in March. There's a whole bunch that we have coming in and different things that I on this shelf I haven't played. I haven't played Gingerbread House. I haven't played Bitoku and some other ones. I have a Shelf of Shame now, so I'm probably going to get something to the table in March, and I'll talk about them at the end of that month. Otherwise, thanks so much for sticking around on this channel again for another month and for watching this video. If you want to be a part of our community, head over to our Discord. The link is in the description. You can chat with us there. We have a bustling community talking about all kinds of things, board game related and non-board game related. And if you're looking for ways to support us, you can also find our Patreon link in the description, the PayPal link, or if you want to get shirts like this, merch like this, you want to support us but actually have something tangible for it, we have a merch store you can find in the description as well. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.